Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for CEO Exclusive, brought to you by Anona Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to CEO Exclusive, where we get emerging trends from CEOs and their most trusted advisors. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. And on today's show, I wanted to kind of raise up and talk a little bit about something that we're hearing and talking about in the broader discourse around socialism versus capitalism. And don't get scared. I try my absolute best to avoid all political conversations on CEO Exclusive for obvious reasons. But I think this is very helpful to think about conscious capitalism versus socialism and why it is that socialism is coming back into the public discourse in such a prominent way over the past few months. So to start off, just to set the context, one of the things that I heard and brought this to mind for me this week is this notion that human beings have an innate need for fairness. Like, we all need to feel like the world that we live in is fair. There's this sense of something being deeply wrong with the fact that if one person is born in one zip code versus another person being born in another zip code, that completely changes the trajectory of their life. And they have absolutely no control over it. And somewhere deep inside of us, like, you know, human beings feel like that is just fundamentally wrong. And the reason why I started thinking about this is I heard about this new book called The Emotional Lives of Primates that was written by a professor at Emory. His name is Frans de Waal, and he studies the behavior of monkeys. And in one of the experiments in the book, it talks about, or he looks at the behavior of two monkeys that are in cages who can see each other, and if they're given the same task, but given disproportionate rewards, like one monkey is given a better reward than the other monkey, the monkey that feels shortchanged kind of goes through all manner of temper tantrum, rattles its cage, throws back the food that it's given, you know, makes a lot of noise. And what he has inferred from this experiment is that primates recognize when one primate is being treated differently than another arbitrarily. And it kind of, as I mentioned, invokes this, you know, automatic, really deep-seated frustration because we have this innate need for fairness. So I just wanted to give that as an example. And so if we think about people's need for fairness in the context of human affairs and the U.S. economy, one statistic that many of us have been hearing about recently is that wealth inequality in the U.S. at this point is at record levels. And in fact, I was reading an article that says that America hasn't seen this much wealth inequality since before the Great Depression, where 0.1% of the U.S. population, now this is not 1%, this is 0.1%, controls 25% of the wealth. It's very disproportionate. And so if we compare that with people's innate need for fairness, like, you can see why that would kind of raise some issues and why there's a lot of, you know, frustration in the public discourse. People are rattling their cages and stomping their feet and doing things just like the monkey in Dr. de Waal's experiment, because they're looking over at other people and being like, well, I'm working hard. I'm working 40 hours a week. You know, I have a job and I'm going to work every day. Why? Just because I have a different set of life circumstances is my life so different than the 0.1%. And so part of the reason why we're having this discourse and why socialism is coming to into prominence is because some people see that as a correction to level the playing field. And I don't have a judgment about socialism versus not socialism, and that's not what I'm bringing up in this discourse. It's just the notion that socialism is a reaction to this perception that the cards are being stacked in some people's favor and against other people, and that's unfair. And so just to kind of level set, I'm going to read the definition of socialism so that we're clear on what it is that we're really talking about. So according to Wikipedia, socialism is a range of economic and social systems characterized by social ownership of the means of production and workers' self-management, as well as the political theories and movements associated with them. Social ownership can be public or collective or ownership or citizens' ownership of equity. And there are many varieties of socialism, and there's no single definition encapsulating all of them. But fundamentally, socialism is about workers' rights and providing like a basic economic kind of subsistence for people who are working, so that people who own a lot of the assets and companies are sharing equitably in the profits of everybody's labor. You know, as an aside, in any business, the reason why there is a business is that there's surplus created. That is the profit. So business produces something, it sells it for some price, and then there's something left over. And fundamentally, socialism is about making sure that the workers who are contributing to the costs also share in that surplus, and they're not disproportionately locked out of getting access to the profits that are a product of their own labor. So once again, this idea is that socialism is supposed to try to correct some of this wealth inequality and meet people's innate need for fairness. And the idea that I think, as we I compare socialism as a potential correction to conscious capitalism, which we've talked about on the show. So I'm bringing it home, folks. Talk about conscious capitalism a lot on CEO Exclusive, and this is where it's leading. The thing that I think I find interesting is that typically what I've heard in the public discourse around socialism is it's really kind of a Robin Hood fix, right? Taking from the rich and giving to the poor. And, we all I like the Robin Hood movie, and a lot of people kind of like Robin Hood, right? We feel okay with Robin Hood, but in real life, that has some side effects. And once again, there's a lot of conversation about meritocracy and people working, and also the rewards that are expected from somebody who takes on the risk and builds a business and has ownership of assets. Fundamentally, our economy, for better or for worse, is built on the notion that people have the right to have rights to assets, and they have rights to ownership. And so, if we start to take from the rich and give to the poor, it may undermine the fundamental system on which our entire economy is built. So the question is, can capitalism as it is be fixed? And I think that it has to be fixed. And part of the reason why I think socialism, while I completely understand, as I've just been kind of explaining, the underlying thing that the discourse around socialism is trying to fix, I think that in general, as a human principle, force, duress, and obligation don't work. So if you're trying to force people, let's say the people who have the assets or the owners of the businesses, if you're trying to force people to give up their wealth and redistribute it, in general, that just doesn't work. And, fundamentally, our capitalist economy is based on free will and people's voluntary exchange of goods and services. And of course, there's a lot of things about the role of government and the social safety net and all that. But fundamentally, I think that the idea of forcing people to give up their profits is ultimately not going to work. One, it just also runs contrary to human nature, and two, it runs contrary to our culture. The U.S. in general is much more of a free market economy than Europe and other economies. Like, Americans just don't like, far prefer free markets than having outside entities or impose their will on individuals. Like, we're just very, very into, as a culture, individual rights. So I think we have to fix capitalism. And the fix, as I'm kind of leading to, and we've been discussing on the show over and over again, I think conscious capitalism is the beginnings of beginning to fix this issue. And one of the ideas in conscious capitalism that I think directly also addresses some of this inequality and could lead to the voluntary redistribution of wealth is conscious leadership and having a conscious culture. And there's certain tenets that if leadership carries them out and they are aware of the well-being of their employees and they're aware of the culture and recognize a culture of fairness and egalitarianism, and they're really serious about it, I think that it automatically leads to the redistribution of resources. Once we get past the notion of conscious capitalism as a good idea and leaders actually commit to the being and the doing of it, that means that they're going to commit time, resources, and money. And part of that money will go to improving the lives of their employees, which I think will naturally lead to the owners of companies and the managers and the leaders of companies naturally redistributing the wealth in ways that are, one, voluntary, and also meet other needs, not just the need to equalize the playing field. They'll do it in ways that are organic, create connection, and really much more natural, I think, for the business and for the employees that work there. So that's kind of where I'm leading. Like, I understand the need, the thing that socialism is trying to fix, but I think trying to force people to do it isn't going to work, once again. So just one last idea, which is I've spoken to people who think, who have a lot of despair around whether or not anyone will voluntarily give up wealth. Soyini, that's a really good idea. It's really Pollyanna. Yes, if we institute and start to spread the values around conscious capitalism, in a perfect world, this will naturally begin to equalize as people understand the way that conscious capitalism works and begin to employ these principles. But some people just don't think that that's true. And what I would counter it with is just like people have an innate need for fairness, people also have an innate need for contribution, and they have an innate need for connection. And fundamentally, we want to be in systems and organizations and environments where there is a cohesion and there is, for lack of a better word, love, right? We talked about love and humanity in business in February a lot. And people want to be in caring, supportive environments. Like, that also is very innate. And so as we, those of us who are interested in the movement and spread of conscious capitalism, start to tap into people's need for connecting and for well-being, the well-being of others and the well-being of the environment in which they work and sit, one can appeal to those other impulses to drive this voluntary redistribution of wealth. So all that to say is I think there's hope. And I don't think we have to employ the Robin Hood solution to fix this issue. I think that certainly the issue has to be fixed, and we can hear the rumblings in the public discourse that something's going to happen, because having wealth as inequitably distributed as it is now is not sustainable. And so something's going to happen. Something always does. But the U.S. culture and economy has transformed peacefully many, many times over the past 300 years, and I have a lot of faith that this will be no different. But so just wanted to offer these ideas on, what's happening and this discourse around socialism in the public sphere today, and compare that to conscious capitalism and talk about why I think they're both potential solutions to the same issue, but of course, as you know, I like conscious capitalism better. So, you've been listening to CEO Exclusive. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. I hope you have a profitable, productive, and very prosperous week. Thanks.
This show is brought to you by Anona Enterprises, where strategy is your access to money and performance. Learn more at AnonaEnterprises.com.